Hi, did somebody else join?
Hi, good afternoon. It's Michelle Whitaker from Healthy Way.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi there.
And I see that Way joined.
Yeah, and Gretchen, this is Dee Dee. Since you're recording it, just make sure before you formally start, once everyone gets on, to let them know it's being recorded so that they can drop off if they object.
Okay. Yeah, we've got a good, I see a few more people who joined who were tentative, so I'm happy to see so many people on the call. So we'll wait another minute or two. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. I don't want to keep you guys waiting. So I know most of you, it's Gretchen Hudson from AEGIS, and I think I've talked to a lot of you either through support or through Healthy Way. And we do have a few people on the call from Healthy Way as well. So if you have questions about how the DIL release testing integrates it with Healthy Way's doing, or just questions in general about the software, feel free to bring those up. And if you're just joining, as Dee Dee mentioned, we are recording this session, and we'll find a way to share that with everybody so that those of you who can't, anybody who couldn't attend in your organization, you could share the recording. So what we wanted to do today was go through the DIL release enhancements, and what we would hope is that when we're through, you guys would actually register in our alpha environment, which is a testing environment, and help us kind of walk through the software and hopefully you won't find any problems, but give us some feedback on what you see and what you think of the enhancements that we've done. And this is obviously a go-to meeting. You guys, your lines are open. You can talk. I want us to have a discussion, so feel free to chime in with any questions that you have as we go through the presentation. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to say before we get started? Okay, can everybody see my screen? Okay, I'll take no news as good news. So what we want to go through today is we'll talk about what's new in DIL 3.0, our DIL 3.0 release, what's going to stay the same, and we'll talk a little about the release itself. And I'll go through, I have screenshots of everything here, but I've found that you guys are probably more open to a live demo, so we'll actually go into the software at some point, and I'll show you the new screens and some of the new processes that are happening in DIL 3.0. And then we'll talk about the actual testing. So one of the biggest changes and one of the main drivers of this release is that we really wanted to increase the reliability and the clarity of the test case results. I think as a lot of you have found as you've gone through the DIL testing, you may run through a test and it ends in some sort of incomplete status. It's stuck in dispatched or stuck in initiated, or you can't see the request or the response, but maybe when you contact support we can see it and it's an error and things like that. So a lot of the changes that we made were to ensure that even when test cases don't finish completely, you can still see them in the DIL so that you can see the error messages that are showing up and hopefully be a little more self-sufficient. Not have to contact us every time a test case doesn't complete. And a lot of some of the reasons that things don't complete are we couldn't identify the participant, for example. So we've made some changes to make it a little bit easier, and that's just a DIL thing. It's nothing to do with our gateway, but the actual application. Make sure we can identify you, which helps us, put that message into your queue on the gateway messages screen so you can actually see what happened. And so that was streamlining that process. Has made a lot of changes and made it a lot easier for you to find bad messages. And then also the way that you actually execute the test cases now, especially say initiator tests, it's going to be again a lot easier for us to associate your incoming messages to that test when there's potentially an issue. So obviously if you're running everything correctly and you're passing or failing or you're getting your responses, you may not have encountered some of these issues, but as you go through your test-driven development, you may find that the problems you're having as you try to run through the DIL are not easily identified in the DIL because of some of the issues we were having with linking requests and responses to the test cases. So hopefully that's been streamlined in a way that's going to make it a lot easier for you guys to be self-sufficient and be able to identify the actual problem. And so we don't have to go dig through server logs and stuff. And a lot of this has resulted in actual changes to the interface. So we'll go through those as well. We have also integrated an HL7 immunization message profile into the DIL. So if any of you are interested in testing an HL7 VXU message, we have that architecture in place. I won't go through that in too much detail, so if anybody has any interest in testing HL7, just send an email to DIL support and I can walk you through that. Another change that we've made in the DIL is we've set up the system so that under a single DIL account, an organization can have multiple test systems. So if you are an organization, maybe have a couple of different environments that you want to test with, you have maybe a developer environment, maybe a QA environment. In the current production DIL, you would have to create different accounts, different actual user IDs and passwords. But with DIL 3.0, those can all be stored under a single account in the DIL. So again, it's meant to kind of streamline the maintenance that you might have to keep up with in the DIL. The test accounts do still have to have separate home community IDs, and we can look at that a little bit when we get into the configuration. But a lot of organizations will maybe put an extension on their HCID to distinguish the different environments. But it does make it a little easier to test when you only have to log into one account. So as I mentioned before, the performance has been increased because we've really streamlined how we are associating participants to tests and how we're associating requests and responses to test cases. So things should run much faster. We've had issues with a lot of organizations who were timing out, for example, on initiator tests because we had a lot of logic in the system to identify that incoming request, make sure we knew who it was and what test was being executed. So the way we're doing it now, it's much faster. So that should run much more smoothly. And we also did some back-end database changes and some architecture updates, to just generally improve overall system performance. Okay, so the idea would be you guys have more access to the error results within the DIL, which is ultimately the goal. We want to give you guys more feedback, in a self-service environment so that you can troubleshoot better when you run into issues. So when we go into the test case configuration, we do have, again, additional spec. We've got the HL7 spec, and then it's instead of, in production today, all we really captured was maybe your gateway. If you put it in there, it wasn't required, and then your endpoints. So the new configuration, we capture a little more information and kind of follow the spec language a little bit more. You'll see references to actors and profiles and service types and service references, and so it, again, really kind of streamlines the process for us and also helps us understand what you're trying to test. And so, again, we'll go through some of those screens when we get into the actual system. What stays the same? So the test case results themselves, you'll see that screen has not changed, where we give out all the details on each rule and whether it passed or failed. Test case results summary, that has not been changed. Test history, and then also the gateway messages screens. So those are all functioning the same. Test execution has changed a little bit only in terms of how you set up a test. So we'll walk through that, and again, hopefully it's not a burden. You definitely don't want that, but if you have multiple systems, it's actually a lot easier to do. So the release itself, we did release alpha last week on the 14th, so it is available now. And again, we'll talk a little bit. I'm going to go through the demo now, but we'll talk a little bit about what what we would like for you guys to do as we go through the alpha phase. And the goal would be to test the application, the user interface, actually running tests within the system, and submitting the results to HealthyWay. They're not real results. None of these results will be saved, but it allows HealthyWay to ensure that they can still follow their processes, once these enhancements go into production. And right now, there are no accounts in the alpha environment. So you guys would all register new, configure your systems within the DIL, and run your tests. When we get to beta, that is actually a conversion of the production information. So you should be able to log in with your production user ID and password, go into the beta environment, see your test results. So that's a different type of testing. So, but what I'd like to show you now is the application and what's new and what the enhancements are, so that you can see potentially what you could test for us. Okay, so I'm going to go into the DIL. This URL, there's also a new user guide, and Dee Dee, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you guys have put it out on the HealthyWay website with the user guide, the testing guide for the alpha release.
Yes. Yes, Jennifer did link that. It's with the other DIL documentation. We'll make sure, Jen, if you could send out in the chat on this GoToMeeting, that will be recorded. Everyone can have access to it. I think that'd be the best way to kind of capture minutes, if you don't mind.
I will check that out shortly.
Thank you.
And the link will be in there as well. So, and again, just to be clear, everything that you put into this alpha testing environment will not be saved. Okay, we're not saving any of the data from alpha. So this is strictly a test environment. So even if you fail all your tests and you submit them to HealthyWay, in no way does it affect your HealthyWay certification. So again, it's just a test of the application and the processes. And this data will be wiped out when we move to beta. I'm going to show you. So the registration, we'll start with registration. The registration screen, you'll see, is much shorter. So all you're really doing is establishing an account name and a password. So this is all we're collecting. We're not asking. Some of the other questions that were here before and that are in production today, they had no bearing on the most recent release of the DIL. So we just removed them. They weren't affecting test cases or test case execution. So this is a much simpler registration process. And as you did in production, you would create your account, and then you'll be told you've got your username and password, and then you can log in to the DIL. Okay. So the first thing you'd want to do is go into this new test systems screen. So you'll notice too there's some links that aren't here anymore, like the gateway profile. So the endpoints that you were entering into the gateway profile screen, or let's say the machine name that you would enter in during registration, those things have all been put into this test system function. So this is where we're going to identify which systems we want to use in the DIL to test, and I could have multiple. Right now I just have the one, since this one's already set up. So you could do add new system. We could look at an existing one, but I'm going to click add. Actually, let's look at one that I've already got. So this test system name, it's whatever you want to call it. So, if you want to call it your QA system, your dev system, whatever, that's up to you. We'd like to know what version, what kind of gateway you're using. And if you click other, you'll get a box where you can give a description. And then if you want to add in your own description of this particular system, you can do it as well. That's just for your information. And then some fields that you guys are probably familiar with. Some of these you may not use for NHIN transactions, and that's fine. We would need a home community ID. You'll notice too we're not asking you for an assigning authority ID anymore. So that's not necessary in the DIL for the tests to execute accurately. So we'll get your assigning authority ID when you send patient discovery responses to us, so we will know that information, but we don't need it associated with your particular account or your test system anymore. If for some reason you use this system, you create it, you've got multiple systems, but you don't want to use one anymore, you can always click this not in use, and when we get to the setup test screen, I'll show you how that will affect the system, the DIL. Machine name, which I know you guys are used to, but we can now add multiple machine names. So you can add as many as you need to here. So that is an enhancement as well, to have multiple machines associated with a single test system. So the next step would be to identify what you're actually going to test with this particular system. So we've got NHIN version 1.0, which is our 2010 specs. You could choose NHIN 2.0, which is our 2011, or if you want to do HL7. So what happens is we'll give you the available profile actors for that particular spec that we support in the DIL. So, you know, these are just things records that we've defined and we put out here for you. They should cover all of the scenarios that you can test within the DIL. There's obviously more to the 2010 specs, but we only do, you know, patient discoveries, queries, and retrieve documents. And this is just a simple add remove function. You also can add any system components. This is kind of a short list right now, but if you wanted to put in anything about it, you know, if you have an EMPI linked to your test system or other, that's fine. It doesn't affect the tests, but it does give us information about what you're testing, which you know, helps us do analysis of our test results. So once you've created all of this, you've entered all this information, there'd be a button to say Create Test System if this were a new system, and then we would see download certs and change configure profiles. So again, you know, download certs used to be a link over on the left, but now it's all within this test system function. So if I click download certs, again, you're probably familiar with this. We've got our instructions and our two you know, root and DIL CA certs. So the machine cert is here. If I had multiple machines, they'd all be listed here. And you just click on this to get the cert. Oops, didn't like that. It'll work when you guys do it, I'm sure. So click on the machine name to download the P12, the private cert for this machine. And again, if I had multiple machines here, I would just click on each and download each and install it. So the actual installation has not changed. You know, once you download the certs, you do what you did in production. You can set the password here, and you know, it could be different for every cert. You can show the password if you want or not. Okay. So the next step would be, you know, once I've identified these profiles, I need to go in and configure each of them. So this is where you're going to put in your endpoints. Okay, so again, this used to be on the gateway profile screen, but now we're going to do it on this configure profile. This has initiating gateway in here. This is just because this is an internal account. You guys wouldn't need to do anything with your initiating gateway endpoints. So as you did in production, we really only need to know your responding gateway endpoints so that we can send your test system messages for these responder scenarios. So you would go into your responding gateway profile, click configure, click the service type. We actually don't, this is actually going to be removed. I mean, right now it should just be the patient discovery. And you put in your actual endpoint here in the service reference field. All right, this one's locked because we've already published it, and I'll get to that in a minute. But you would type in your actual endpoint, the host name, which should match this host name, and then the port. Once you've added a reference, you will have the ability to verify the cert and the endpoint. So for those of you who have, you've been through the onboarding process, you know that when you ask for us to configure your endpoints, Fran or I will go out and try to make sure your certs are installed, make sure we can access a WSDL or a WSDL page without any errors, to make sure that endpoint is actually accessible. So that has been integrated into the application now. So preferably before you publish, although the system won't make you do this, but we would prefer that you do this before you ask us to publish it. But if you click this Verify Certain Endpoint, you should get a message that the cert was successfully installed and that the endpoint was successfully accessed. So we're sending like a dummy PD request over to the endpoint. For example, it's empty, it's got default data. All we're checking is that we got something back from your system that was not connection refused or anything like that. And and obviously if you get something like this, then you would need to go back and check. Now this one is our problem, lab properties, but you may see something like page not found or something, and some kind of error that you would want to address before trying again and actually trying to publish the endpoint.
Hey, Gretchen?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't know if you wanted us to save questions to the end or if we could ask questions.
Well, no, go ahead.
Okay. While you're on the screen, previously when we published a new endpoint, it would take overnight, I guess, to get so that we could actually start using that. Is that still the case? Or when you publish it, is it immediately available, or do you have to wait for some overnight process?
We do still have to. You do still have to wait. So I was just going to say, once you've published, you do still need to let us know. There are still 2 or 3 steps that we have not automated yet. Some configuration on our end because we use our participant proxy server, and so that server does refresh overnight. So it will stay. So once in production, when you guys published your endpoints, you would send us an email and say, okay, I published, I'm ready to go. You would still need to do that and let us know that you've published your endpoints, because then we will have to go in and do a couple things on our end to get you onto the participant proxy server that we use. Okay, so once the cert has been verified and you get your successful messages, let's see if I can show you what one looks like. Well, it does look good when you can see it. So it'll tell you it's successful. At that point, you want to publish your endpoint. So again, the same way as you did on your gateway profile screen, you would publish. And once you publish your endpoint, it can't be changed. So that is still, that logic's still in place for DIL 3.0. And then, as I just mentioned, once you publish, you still want to send an email to DIL support to let us know that you published it, because we'll have to do a couple things on our end to finalize that configuration. Okay, and those are all the steps for configuring your system within the DIL. So once I've done all those steps, I'm ready to execute tests. Does anybody have any questions about creating your test system?
I guess while we're on that, are we still using the same patient and patient's document? Or
Yes. Yep. All the tests from production are in this environment, and they're all configured the same way.
Okay. One question. When I see you're doing these updates, and I do appreciate them. I guess one question is, how do you decide what you're putting in the next update of the DIL?
For the DIL?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Mario drives a lot of that logic for us. Mario Highland, our vice president, or in terms of what he thinks the industry would appreciate the most, and trying to streamline the process and streamline the testing and be able to support more varied organizations. And some of it also depends on what we've heard throughout this past year, from the support desk and the various issues that have been logged with us, and that helps to drive it as well. So that gives us a lot of feedback from the user community.
So do you want us to just send you emails on feedback on enhancements we would like to see?
Yeah, definitely. Just send them to DIL support. We're always open to it. We'd love to hear what you guys think and what you think would make the product more usable for you. Definitely. I'm going to sign out real quick and sign in as my, just so you can see.
While you're doing that, Gretchen, this is Dee Dee. I just wanted to let everyone know too. I mean, since Healthy Way is using AEGIS as our testing partner vendor here, we would love to hear the feedback as well. If you wouldn't mind to copy it to testing at healthywayinc.org, any suggestions for improvement, because then that way we can also make sure those kind of things are put on some sort of roadmap and considered, by Healthy Way, because of course we also have a contract with AEGIS, and we can put that in requirements, documents, or things like that as necessary. So
definitely, yeah. And I do have in the slide presentation, the last slide does have those email addresses for you all, so we'll get back to that when we walk through the system.
Perfect. And Gretchen, I just saw a chat message from Michael Miller who's asking, can we interrupt, or are we saving questions until the end? Definitely ask any questions as you go.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I just started interrupting.
So that's fine. Yeah, no, I know it's a lot to take in, so I don't want to confuse anybody or have you wait till the end and then we forget. So I just wanted to show you guys an example. You know, again, I could enter 15 test systems here if I wanted to, but you know, we've got different test systems for the same account. This one is actually just a dummy account. It's not actually going to work, but I did want to show you what it looks like when I go to set up a test and I've got multiple systems. One other thing I wanted to point out before we go to the test systems actually executing is you'll also notice that this participant info screen has shrunken considerably. So in production today, the participant info screen has like the patient ID mapping, for example, and then that document metadata hyperlink next to every patient. Those functions are no longer necessary. We've never used the document metadata function for the Healthy Way test, so that's been obsolete for quite a while. But the actual patient mapping, we have learned, is not necessary for executing the tests in the DIL. So that's one less step you'll have to do when you go to set up your tests. So we don't need to know your patient ID number for the reference patients anymore. We'll get that when you send us the patient correlation. And that's how a production system would work anyway. So one less thing for you to worry about when you're doing your setup for your tests. Okay, so other changes to the system. So now when we go to set up a test, we have some choices here. So you'll see that I can choose a system when I go to set up my test. Now what we've done is, you know, each system is linked to a spec by virtue of the profiles that you've configured. So if we go into, you know, Big Brother here, they've got a couple different specs associated with this system. So if I want to run an HL7 test, I should see this particular test system as an option. If I want to run NHIN 2.0, I should also see this test system as an option on the setup test screen. Okay, now, and then this one, you know, I've got a couple, again, those shouldn't be there. But again, if I for HL7 version 2, I should see this test system. I don't know if this one has any profiles configured. Right, there's no profiles for some of these. So anyway, depending on the configuration of your system and the profile actors that are set up for that particular system, you know, this will be filtered for you. In addition, the service sets are linked to a spec. So if I decide I'm only going to run 2011, that's the spec I'm going to run, I should only see service sets that are specific to that spec. So we're hoping this makes it a little easier for you to narrow down what you want to test. If I want to test the 2010, I've only got 2 choices. And these are radio buttons instead of checkboxes, which they should have always been, basically, because you can only ever choose one at a time. So really, this has just changed a little bit in the sense that we are trying to ensure that what you're testing, the service set that you're testing, is applicable to the test system that you want to test. So you're not trying to run a 2010 service set for a test system that hasn't been configured for 2010. Because again, that just brings up more questions about why are my tests not finishing, when in reality you should never run it anyway. Okay, so let's go back here to my account that's actually set up. And on the setup test screen, you know, for this particular test participant, I've only got one test system, so it should always pop default in there for me. So there's no extra clicks for you if you just have one system. And then here, and you'll notice too, I don't have an HL7 option because I don't have a system that runs HL7. So if I were to set up a test system with some profile actors for HL7, I would then see that in this drop down. So we're just trying to, again, direct you to the right service set for the right test system to avoid any incomplete tests. And again, if I choose 2010, I've got just a few other options. Okay, so let's say I'm going to run, so and same as you did before, you pick your service set, you click Save and Close, and that will activate the service set for you. Save and Submit sends it over to HealthyWay. So those functions have not changed. So once we set up our test, we go to test execution. So again, no changes here. Now once we go to the Initiator Test, you'll see that there's a new button here called Activate. So in production today, you have the ability to just run whatever test. Once I activate this, just set up this test, I can just send a message from the test system to the DIL without having to do anything more than just selecting the service set. And what we do in production today is we can figure out which test you're running based on the patient you sent us and the type of message it is. So, you know, if you've got the smoke test active and you send us a patient discovery for patient 2, well then we know this is the only choice there is. So what that prevents us from doing though is putting multiple patient discoveries in the same service set for the same patient, which we may want to do if we're testing different scenarios. You know, can we find that patient based on, you know, the minimum parameters? Can we find it based on address? Can we find it based on mother's maiden name? You know, those would all have to be in separate service sets in production today. So in order to give us a little more flexibility and be able to put multiple tests of the same type for the same patient into one service set or one scenario, we modified the system so that you have to tell us, you need to activate the test before you send us the message, and whatever you send us, we are going to link to this test. So if I activate this test, that means I expect a patient discovery to come in the door. If you accidentally send me a query for documents, it's still going to be linked to this test, and you're just going to get an error message that says, you sent me a query for documents and I expected a patient discovery. So it kind of, you know, again, feeds into our new concept of really kind of streamlining, linking these requests and responses together, linking them to a test case to be able to tell you exactly what went wrong. And so once this has been activated, you know, as you did in production today or what you would do today, you would initiate a message to us. And once it's completed, you know, you would see the results here just like you would in production. But the other thing that could happen, again, if you accidentally send us a query for documents, this is not going to tell you if it passed or failed. So it's possible that you're sitting here waiting and nothing's happening. We may have been able to identify the message, either because we could identify you as the participant, or, you know, we knew it was a request coming in, but we didn't know which test you were trying to run because there's something wrong with the message. You may not necessarily see results here, and so we just put a message here to remind you that you could go to the Gateway Messages screen and see an error message telling you what happened with this particular test. For example, you would see a message out there that says, you know, you sent us a message type that we didn't expect. And this particular screen has not changed. But here's an example here, you know, unexpected message type. So the message received does not match the type we activated. So that's a new error message that you would see, but you're only going to see that on the Gateway Messages screen. So again, if you're waiting and waiting, or you may even, you may even get a response from the DIL at some point. But if you see that those screens are not refreshing and they're not giving you a pass or fail or an error, you can always check the Gateway Messages screen. Now, if I want to run another test, I need to deactivate this one and activate a new one. So you can see I can't activate anything until I deactivate this. So the test that's active, that's the one we expect, and that's the one we expect to run. That's what we're trying to resolve. We're expecting a patient discovery. Once I deactivate this, then that's kind of cleared out, and I can move on to a query for documents. And now we're expecting a query for documents for this patient. So that is a new step in the test case execution process. Does anybody have any questions about this piece? Our issue on the DIL end was really about initiating because, obviously if you're responding to something we sent to you, we know what we're expecting. It's a little more straightforward. But when initiating from an outside system, we really need to make it clearer as to exactly what we expected. And this also helps us give you, error messages that are more relevant instead of something just never finishing. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. And we can look at the responder scenario. The only change here is that we don't have the execute scenario button anymore. So again, we needed to streamline things and make it so that we're just executing one test at a time. That's the test we expect, the message type we expect, and that helps us give you better results. So if we had all of these activated at once and one of them gets an error of some sort or we can't resolve it, everything just kind of shuts down. And I think you guys have probably all experienced that at one time or another, where everything just kind of gets stuck. So if we just keep it to one test at a time, that allows us to give you better feedback. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Okay, a couple other things too. The user guide, the new user guide is available here as well. Should be the DIL 3.0 user guide. Hopefully in the next release we'll have the updated FAQ as well. I don't know if that'll be, should be in beta, but based on what Fran and I have learned over the past year, we've tried to make these more relevant. You guys probably don't even look at these today. They don't give you a whole lot of information, so we updated those and those will be available in beta. The test history screen has not changed. And as I said earlier, the gateway messages screen still functions in the same way. Okay, and that's probably a lot to take in. That's one of those things that once you start pushing buttons, you may have lots of questions, so feel free to contact me. Okay, so again, as we talked about before, that what we're looking at is the alpha environment, so all those functions are available, and it's a blank slate really, and it will be after alpha as well, so hopefully if you guys give us feedback on the registration process, how difficult was it to really set up your test system, did you feel like it sort of improved the process? That would be really good feedback for us. And then obviously if you find any defects, we would want to know.
That's one of the questions I was going to ask, Gretchen. If they do find defects, do they just send it to your normal support, or is there something special you wanted to capture these in?
No, just the DIL support email is fine.
Okay.
Okay. So you'll have to register, go through test system configuration, download certs, all that good stuff, and then make sure all that's working for you. Make sure you can execute the tests and get your results. And hopefully it's improved, but at a minimum, hopefully we haven't broken anything or made it more difficult for you. And then, as I mentioned, and I don't know, Dee Dee, if you have any comments, but we would like you to submit, one or two test case results to HealthyWay so they could see and validate that process is still working. And so, Dee Dee, I don't know, do you want the testers to email you if they've submitted anything?
Yeah. Why don't we follow the same exact workflow as we did for the actual testing that they've done for either participant or product testing to date? Save and submit to us, send us an email with a unique execution ID, and then that way we'll make sure to be able to go back behind the scenes and review that we got the test results and that we could access them, and just kind of doing the usability testing, but also the functionality to make sure the whole workflow works.
Correct. Yep. Okay. And then as we move into beta, hopefully you guys will all still be with us. What we are doing at that point, so obviously we need to move all this into production, and we want to do it with the minimal amount of disruption to anyone's workflows. So we are converting all the test history, all your submitted results, any tests you've ever run in the DIL will still be available in DIL 3.0. We're going to take your test system information as we know it today and convert it into that new test system configuration model. So our beta phase is meant to test that conversion. So the goal there would be, if it should have your production account ID, your production password. You should be able to log into beta and run tests with no problem. You should be all set up. You should also be able to see all your test history. So beta really is a test of the conversion. We'll probably also have a few minor enhancements, and then obviously any defect fixes that we might need to put out there that may be included in beta as well. But the main goal is the conversion. These are just screenshots of what we already looked at. So I'll just scroll through these pretty quickly. And a lot of the information I have in here is in the DIL user testing guide that Dee Dee mentioned is out on the Healthy Way website. So you'll find a lot of these screenshots, a lot of this information that I've given you today is in that guide. Okay, so gateway profiles is gone. We went through test system configuration. And again, this walks a little bit at a high level through actually creating the test system itself. Download certs. Make sure you configure your profiles with your endpoints, your service references. And again, make sure you verify the endpoints and the certs. And once you've gotten the successful messages for that, you can publish. We have a screenshot of it right now. And again, we still need you to email us once you've published, and we'll finish up that configuration. And set up test and text execution, so screenshots there. And then again, the FAQ will be in beta, and the new DIL user guide, not the testing guide, the actual user guide is in the DIL. So the release testing guide is focused really on this particular phase, the alpha phase, what's new, what you guys can help us with. And then the user guide that's in the DIL is just the generic updates to the user guide. Okay, questions or anything you guys want me to go over again or anything? As we mentioned, you can always contact me or send an email to Testing at Healthy Way Inc. with any feedback, questions, concerns.
I want to thank those that are from the other side of the continent for joining us at a very early morning time, and everyone else. I know, as Gretchen said, there's a lot here. Until you play with it, you might not have questions, but please send those out. We encourage your participation because this is the only way we can make sure that we, roll something out into production that's really ready for prime time. So we appreciate your help, and hopefully you'll find that it's going to make our ongoing testing easier and also allow you to do some testing that you've not done. For instance, the HL7 components are not in our testing program per se. They're definitely a value add for you.
Yeah, and I also want to add that I do thank you all very much for participating today and for your willingness to test with us. Obviously, user input is invaluable with such a big release like this. Okay, well, if nobody has any questions, I will let you all go. You have 15 minutes of your day back. And once we do post the recorded GoToMeeting, we'll let you know where it is. And feel free to email us with any questions, any concerns. Log in, try it out, and let us know what you think. You have a couple weeks. Like I said, beta starts on the 11th of August, so you have a couple weeks where you guys could go in and play and run as many tests as you want. Okay, well, thank you guys very much. Have a good day.